There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you have done. It is the exhaustion of a mind that never stops. You lie down, and the thinking begins. You finish a conversation, and the analysis starts. You make a decision, and immediately your mind begins dismantling it, questioning it, running through every version of what could go wrong. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, a quiet part of you believes this is just what intelligent people do. That thinking more means understanding more. That if you just keep turning it over, you will eventually arrive at certainty, at safety, at the right answer. But what if that belief is the very thing keeping you stuck? Today, we are going to look honestly at overthinking, not to shame it, not to dismiss it, but to understand what it actually is, where it comes from, and why it so convincingly disguises itself as something useful. The first thing worth saying is this: overthinking does not feel like fear. It feels like diligence. It feels like responsibility. It feels like you are the kind of person who takes things seriously, who does not rush, who considers consequences. And in small doses, that quality is genuinely valuable. Careful thinking protects us. Reflection helps us grow. But there is a line. And most people who overthink have crossed it so many times they can no longer see where it is. The line is this: useful thinking moves toward a conclusion. Overthinking circles endlessly without arriving anywhere. It is not analysis, it is a loop. And loops, in psychology, are almost always driven by anxiety, not by intelligence. Modern research into anxiety and cognitive patterns has shown something that might surprise you. The brain, when it perceives a threat, real or imagined, activates the same stress response. It does not distinguish cleanly between a tiger in the room and a difficult email you have not yet sent. The nervous system responds to the story your mind tells, not only to the facts in front of you. And so when you replay a conversation from 3 days ago, your body is still partially living inside that moment. The cortisol is still moving. The heart rate is still slightly elevated. You are not thinking your way to safety. You are keeping yourself inside the danger. This is one of the central insights that Epictetus explored in the Enchiridion. The idea that our distress is shaped not only by what happens to us, but by the judgments we place on what happens. The event occurs, then the mind adds a story, and it is often the story, not the event itself, that causes the prolonged suffering. This is not a dismissal of pain. Some events are genuinely hard, some losses are real, but the layer of interpretation, the catastrophizing, the worst-case narration, the endless what-ifs, that layer is something we have more influence over than we realize. Carl Jung would have recognized something else in the overthinking pattern. He understood that the parts of ourselves we have not examined tend to drive us from below the surface. When we have not learned to sit with uncertainty, when we have not developed a relationship with our own emotional world, the mind compensates. It tries to think its way through feelings it has never been taught to feel. It reaches for logic because vulnerability feels too exposed. Overthinking, from this angle, is sometimes the mind's attempt to avoid the body, to stay in the head because the heart feels too dangerous. And this is where the disguise becomes so convincing. Because the person who overthinks is often genuinely thoughtful. They care deeply. They are sensitive to nuance. They notice things others miss. These are real strengths. But those same strengths, when driven by unprocessed anxiety, become a trap. The sensitivity that makes you perceptive also makes you hypervigilant. The care that makes you loving also makes you afraid of getting things wrong. The intelligence that helps you solve problems also turns against you when there is no problem to solve. Only a feeling to sit with. So what is actually happening when you cannot stop thinking? One useful framework is to separate 4 things that the mind tends to collapse into one. The first is the event. What actually happened, stripped of interpretation. The second is the story. What your mind says it means, what it predicts, what it fears. The third is the body reaction. The tightness in the chest, the restlessness, the shallow breathing that tells you something feels threatening. And the fourth is the chosen response, what you actually decide to do once you have seen the other 3 clearly. Most overthinkers live almost entirely in the second layer, the story. And because the story feels so real, so detailed, so logically constructed, it is easy to mistake it for truth. But the story is not the event. The story is a creation of a mind that is trying to protect you, and sometimes, in its urgency to protect, it manufactures danger that is not yet there. This does not mean your feelings are wrong. They are not. Feelings are always valid as signals, but signals need to be interpreted, not obeyed blindly. When the fire alarm goes off, you check for fire. You do not simply assume the building is burning and run. Emotional regulation is not about silencing the alarm. It is about learning to investigate before you react. There is a practical shift that many people find genuinely helpful. When you notice the loop beginning, when the same thought returns for the fourth or fifth time, try asking a different kind of question. Not what could go wrong, but what is actually true right now, in this moment, in this room. Not what might happen, but what is within your control today. Not what does this mean about me, but what would I say to someone I love who was thinking this exact thought? That last question is particularly powerful. We are almost always kinder to others than we are to ourselves. The inner critic that drives overthinking rarely speaks to us the way we would speak to a friend. And noticing that gap between the harshness we accept internally and the compassion we would offer externally is often the beginning of real change. It is also worth saying something about the relationship between overthinking and identity. For many people, the constant analysis has become so familiar that stillness feels wrong. Quiet feels like danger. If the mind is not running, something must be missing. And so even when life is genuinely calm, the mind goes looking for problems to solve, threats to anticipate, conversations to rehearse. Not because there is danger, but because the nervous system has learned to associate activity with safety. Learning to tolerate stillness, to let a moment be unanalyzed, to let a feeling pass without immediately explaining it, is one of the quieter forms of courage. It does not look dramatic. It does not feel like achievement. But it is, in its own way, a profound act of self-command. You are not broken because you think too much. You are not weak because your mind runs fast and hard. In many ways, the very fact that you are here, asking these questions, looking honestly at your own patterns, is evidence of something real and valuable in you. The goal is not to think less. The goal is to think with more freedom, to be the one who chooses when to engage the mind, rather than the one who is always at its mercy. Inner peace is not the absence of thought. It is the ability to watch a thought without being consumed by it, to feel a feeling without becoming it, to hold uncertainty without needing to resolve it immediately. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, one of the most important skills a human being can develop. If this video gave you something to sit with, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology of the inner world, Inside the Labyrinth has more waiting for you. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.